told him and left the message that we wanted to speak. The next morning, my teenage son answered the phone, came to the back of the house where I was, and said, "Mom, would the vice president be calling you?" I said, "It could be, Rich. Why?" He said, "Well, this man's on the phone." So I went to the phone, talked to the Vice President, Bush, who said, "Come to Washington, we want to help you." And he finished the conversation with, "And by the way, that was quite a character that answered the phone." So I asked Rich what he meant. Rich said, "Honestly, Mom, I didn't answer the phone, Scobie's Bar and Grill." I told him that would catch up with him someday. But he said, "You know, this strange man was calling you at 7 o'clock in the morning. I wanted to know who he was." He said he was the vice president, so I asked him, "The vice president of what?" Rich went on to the Air Force Academy. When he was a lieutenant, then President Bush gave a speech to a group much like yourselves and told that story. Rich was in the audience, climbed under the table and said, "Oh no, my commander-in-chief, I'll never get promoted." But to his credit, Rich Scobie just pinned a star on his shoulder a month ago. He's a new general. Well, we wanted to take that disastrous loss and create a positive, so from that negative, and we came up with the idea of continuing that Challenger mission for the students still waiting for the lessons. Well, today, more than 8 million students have flown a space mission to the moon, to Mars, to Jupiter, to rendezvous with a comet. We never dreamed that the Challenger Center realistic space simulations to inspire students with exciting possibilities for the future would grow into such a vibrant worldwide network of 50 centers that today reach around the world, from the United States to Canada to England, even to South Korea. And here in Kentucky, you have 3. The first one was built in Hazard, and then Paducah, and you had one at Radcliffe that moved to Louisville to a magnet school for aviation. And I just visited their center, and it's marvelous. And I understand Radcliffe is providing great service for Lindsey Wilson. So Kentucky has 2 more than Tennessee. You have 3 more than Mississippi. So congratulations to Kentucky. And the credit goes to your governor at the time, who wanted one on each end of the state and one in the middle. Several years after the loss of Challenger, I met Lieutenant General Don Rogers for the first time at an Easter sunrise service at Arlington National Cemetery, where Dick Scobie was buried and where his wife had had her service. He was a wonderful, kind gentleman, and our friendship grew. And from that friendship came marriage. If you want to know about the romance, you have to read the book. About a few years after that, Robert Schuller invited me to speak on the Hour of Power. And at that time, he challenged me to write a book about the story of Challenger. It was painful to dredge up all the memories. It was difficult to understand them, much less write about them. But Don Rogers was there with me, encouraging me. You see, the world knew how they died. We wanted the world to know how they lived. And we were eager to share with our nation how the family successfully fulfilled our dreams. And I wanted to show the naysayers who said it could not be done that with persistence and belief in our mission, we could overcome adversity so that our dreams could soar. In addition, I had a bit of a personal need to be recognized as someone other than the widow of the astronaut. So I wanted to write about the silver lining, to tell about the bright light that radiated from behind the dark clouds of grief, to reveal rays of hope and optimism. After the book was released, the first book, in '96, the 10th year anniversary, a book tour that took me all around the world. I was feeling fairly chipper. Finally, I was somebody. I was an author. I had been on all those morning and evening talk shows, and of the day of the 10th year anniversary of the loss of Challenger, my son was invited to fly over the stadium of Super Bowl 30 in Phoenix. It had been announced that the missing man formation would be led by Captain Rich Scobie, son of the Challenger commander. Just after the Star-Spangled Banner and before the Dallas Cowboys and Pittsburgh Steelers ran onto the field, the announcer asked the huge audience to look to the sky. The crowd was quiet. The planes approached in a tight group until they were just above the stadium. And the F-16 jets appeared on the southern horizon. Then one jet broke away from all the rest and flew straight toward the heavens. And then the announcement, the son of an astronaut flying to honor his father and crew. A father looking down on his son. And that day, I knew, Dick Scobie knew, Rich was flying airplanes in his footsteps. Well, the rest of the story, at the airport, when we were getting ready to leave, a crowd of people ran up to me at the Phoenix airport. They said, "Oh, are you June Scobie?" Oh yes, they've seen me on television. They read my book. But the question was, "Are you the mother of the pilot?" What joy. So I was promoted that day. Well, I've gone on to write several books, including a whole series of science fiction books for children called The Star Challengers. They're very exciting, and they include a mysterious commander, Zota. Well, that's a whole other story. But the project, I could say, has been enthusiastically received and endorsed by Neil Armstrong, who's now grown to be a dear friend, Buzz Aldrin, Sally Ride, and Leonard Nimoy, and many more. They've been wonderful. Reporters continued to ask, well, what experiences in your youth, what was it that gave you the courage to turn this tragedy to the Challenger to a triumph, to create the lessons for all the school children waiting? I answer that question in my Silver Linings 25th year edition that's released this year, that they say is waiting out there for you. That story, in a sense, began with Ron Glosser, because he asked me to join the Guidepost organization. And some of you have read my story in Guidepost. But what you may not have known until you read the story was that I grew up in poverty. In fact, we were the poorest family among poor neighbors. My mother was mentally ill. My father was an itinerant carpenter. Sometimes we moved 3, 4, 6 times a year. So Daddy left the bill collectors behind and we moved on all across the South. When I was 9, and it was a truly devastating time in my life, someone gave my mother a book, Power of Positive Thinking, and some tangerines. I was interested in the tangerines, that beautiful, luscious fruit. But as I began peeling it, I realized that the name on the book was Peele, Norman Vincent Peale. So I began turning the pages. That was a most marvelous book, because even as a child, 9 years old, I could understand the power of positive thinking. And I created my own ABCs. A was for attitude. If you can turn your negatives into something powerful, positive, you can make a difference. And to forgive. Attitude was important. B was for belief, to believe in yourself and to believe in a power greater than yourself. And C was to make a commitment to overcome your difficulties. And that day as a child, I did that. Those are the same strategies I used. to help the families overcome our grief, to build the Challenger Centers to solve those problems of people waiting for us for lessons. It's a story about forgiveness, triumph, and hope. Weaved throughout the book, for those of you who are fans of space exploration, I began as a teenager living right down the street from Werner von Braun, where he was building the rockets, moved to where Alan Shepard was flying on Mercury, moved again where Glenn was flying with, and eventually where Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin climbed out up on the moon and took those first steps. So those famous highlights in space program are weaved throughout the book. Begins with that starry-eyed child who looked to the stars and prayed, believed in that power greater. This winding path through childhood of homelessness, divorce, death, and mental illness and rejection as a teenager, and bullies who teased that the Kent kids, well, I won't go on with that one. But I answered the reporter's probing question of how by telling them the same strategy I used as a child is what I used to overcome the problems with the loss of the Challenger and our grief. I tell that story not because I'm proud, but because I've learned not to be too proud. And I tell it to help anyone who's struggling with tribulations, to help them feel that they're not limited by their circumstances. So Challenger was not the end of the story. It was only a transition chapter. And that's where we are today as we move away tomorrow with the last endeavor. It's flying tomorrow. Lots of excitement at Kennedy. I'd rather be here tonight, is why I'm here. But it's all about America's space program. And as we move from shuttle, we're moving on, believe me. On my board, serve many people who are already working in private industry and commercialization of flight, and it needs to happen. I think it's just around the corner because the federal government needs to be helping education, need to be helping universities. Thank you for this opportunity to share my life story with you. Thank you for this opportunity to meet and know and love Lindsey Wilson College and all of you great people. Thank you, Ron Glosser, for inviting me. Thank you for listening to him, Bill Lucky. Thank you all. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.